Alex Bendersky, welcome to Tuesdays with Mike. How are you?
I am doing very well, Mike. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
I'm looking forward to a conversation with you. You have a very interesting background, and I think even an interesting foreground of where you're headed. And I love the influence you've got, the introspection that you've delivered to us, the thought leadership that you're bringing to our profession. And I'd like to just, hear just a little bit about your background before we start looking at your foreground. So, if we can, let's start off with just introducing you to our audience first. And we could start with maybe your early life story of what brought you to physical therapy, childhood, etc., and lean into that a little bit if you would.
Of course, Mike. Thank you. And again, I always and eternally introduce myself as a physical therapist. I am a physical therapist. My background. So I was one of the first DPT classes. That ages me, but
Mm.
I entered a PT program under the condition and under the understanding that this Chicago Medical School structured a DPT program to align with the medical students, and it was just another iteration of their doctorate degree that they were giving.
Okay.
So my undergraduate degree is in biology and history, and so I entered the typical pre-med route. I got admitted to medical schools, but then I volunteered at Children's Memorial Hospital because it was across the street from where I did my undergrad.
Mhm.
And there you go through different floors, and every medical floor carried more dissonance about the pressures of the profession, about the difficulties of entering a medical profession, until you got
Mhm.
to the basement, which was the pediatric floor, right? The pediatric
Yeah.
basement, or the therapy basement. And the therapy basement was like the happy place. Like there was,
Yeah.
that's the kids with variable degrees of difficulty were still happy. The parents were happy, not without challenges, but then it was a choice. Do you enter a program where you deal with a lot of administrative difficulties, or do you enter a happy profession? And so that's what
Mm.
got me into the physical therapy world. And then
Wow.
3 years later, I graduated. I had an opportunity to also get a healthcare administration degree because there was a parallel, a dual degree choice with Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. That's how I got through my healthcare administration position. And then I did 10 years of the typical PT work. So I did my all of the certifications, so all of the typical trajectory of manual certification and McKenzie and Maitland and now and following the certifications, following the fellowship track, there was a challenge of forming a clinical residency. So I worked for an
Mm.
organization that was absorbed by Athletico, but it was called Accelerated Rehabilitation. And so we didn't have an orthopedic residency, so we got the entire APTA accreditation, then teaching in residency. So you really get a first-hand perspective of what clinical process looks like. And I think that also gives helps you with introspection that what is clinical care? And what I would tell my
Mm.
residents is that clinical care is 51% substance, should be 51% substance, 49% nonsense. Like it's okay what you do with your time, but
Right.
substantiate. I think that was my foundation of evidence-guided clinical care, that
Wow.
the objectively guided care. And then I got into health technology. So my health tech entry was through integration of VR systems for complex pain management. That was my point of interest. I always was interested in this human condition, so pain was obviously part of it. But using virtual reality, piloting different VR systems when they were still just trying to enter the market, aligning with them, and then scaling them through an entire system, getting the system and clinicians the opportunity to expand their clinical product portfolio beyond their dexterity and manual skills.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was
So
my story.
you're a neurotherapist at heart when you're actually looking at changing the brain, exploring what the brain perceives in a person with persistent pain. So you're a hidden neurotherapist at heart inside all of those orthopedics. I'll incline you over that direction with my moniker. So I'm correct then in understanding, because as I was looking through your background, you actually were in the MHA program during your final year of PT school, right?
Yep. That's
Yeah.
how it was structured. So you got like business courses, and you got the last year of PT clinical rotations, which was, I guess,
Wow. Yeah,
yeah.
that's exceptional. I love that story and appreciate the depth of the background. So now, you look back, you've been a physical therapist for 25 years. You've been in spaces of VR and EHR and technology and manual care and fellowship residency discussions and first experimental, if you will, DPT programs. A lot's changed in 25 years. And one would assume that this 25 years of the profession's history has had more change than any prior 25 years. We've had a shift in culture, reimbursement, models of care. The pandemic even accelerated, more remote care with telehealth, etc. Non-clinical physical therapy opportunities, which you yourself, clearly exemplify as well. It's got to be more than really even any 10-year period. If you just look back 2016 to now, would you agree that we've been in a sea change?
I think we have been in a perpetual change. However,
Hmm.
I think we have changed so much, and yet we've stayed the same. And I think one
Okay.
thought experiment is, at least through the orthopedic sports oriented lens, if you step into a typical outpatient practice in 2026, and
Hmm.
you just have a mental time machine, and you step into the same practice in 1996, you're going to have a very similar experience. So the clinical output did not adapt, it did not keep up with a administrative output, with clinical, with a non-clinical development, with technology development. So we've grown
Hmm.
as a profession, we've evolved as a profession, but our output did not evolve at the same rate as the rest of us. And so that,
Okay.
I think, creates this conflict, right? Where you're still doing the same 4 or 5 activities that you were doing 30 years ago, you just
Hmm.
label them a little differently. And I think that's part of the reason why I've entered that more of a technology route, is that I think technology is a natural extension of our human ability, from
Hmm.
standpoint of it helps us visualize, it helps us understand, and it helps us diversify, which
Hmm.
we need to do. So that my mission for the last 5 years has been, how do we get our large community to embrace technology, not just as a consumer where we just buy it and then put it in a corner, but as an actual user, a developer, entrepreneur, so that we clinicians become clinical entrepreneurs. We evolve technology, we
Hmm.
co-develop technology with technologists, uh, and that has been a challenge, and it's also, I think, one of the biggest opportunities. So I think the next 5 years are definitely going to be different. You can see exactly where
Hmm.
the we're trending, but it is an exciting time to be a clinician. It is an exciting time to be alive, and I'm still clinically relevant. I see patients 1 day a week out of my friend's clinic, so I'm still clinically involved. I'm the dinosaur in the
Hmm.
clinic that kind of stays in the corner until being asked to help. So yeah.
So let's go to 1996. You see, as you mentioned, the clinical output is very similar to 2026. And if you are, let's say advising a physical therapy clinic that is practicing similar to how they would have been 30 years ago, and let's just make it easy on the story that we're trying to tell here. It's an orthopedic outpatient facility, seeing people with persistent pain and joint replacement, etc. What would be one or two elements of technology that you would implore the therapist delivering care in 2026 as though it's 96? What's one or two things that you would ask them to consider to integrate?
So I think it's a terrific question, Mike. One way we approach a musculoskeletal condition, one way we approach a pain-specific condition, is from an episode of care lens instead of
Mm-hmm.
a continuum of care lens. And so
Hmm.
when we're delivering care, we're delivering a segregated standalone care for that episode that does not integrate, does not communicate with additional episodes or future episodes or
Hmm.
downstream episodes.
Yeah.
What we need to appreciate is that as a system, it's an evolving adaptive system that tends to integrate and evolve with other iterations, with other healthcare professions. And so this continuum of care that allows us to see our fit, our swim lane across other swim lanes. And in 1996, it was acceptable because the entire philosophy and discipline saw a problem as something that you needed to fix. In
Yeah.
2026, we need to approach these not as a problem that we need to fix, but a problem where we need to align with a patient or consumer as they
Hmm.
continue to navigate healthcare waters. And so
Right.
this lane needs to be extended as a continuum. And so the right product, the right process at the right time, appreciating that we don't just work on habituation, work on proliferation of these systems so that the systems have a greater fit for their immediate environment.
Yeah, yeah. You're talking about precision rehabilitation. What does this person need? Intervention, time, and person all being considered. You're marrying that with the definitions of evidence-based medicine. Again, best science applied to this diagnosis that feels commensurate with this person's preferences. And what I'm hearing you say is that, the swim lane isn't something that we tap our watch when we hit the wall and see how quickly, i.e., how few visits we got this accomplished. But we understand that we need to invite this individual back into the pool on a not necessarily regular basis, but to continue to be a part of their life, to be able to help manage that care and help them optimize, when they've been resolved, if you will, or symptom free for 6 months. Now we can actually teach them a new stroke, if you will, if the analogy continues there, rather than episodes of care start and stop. I hope they end up coming back to see me when something else happens to them. We can manage a condition rather than manage symptoms.
Yeah, if you equate life to athletics, right?
Mm-hmm.
The single race does not define your entire athletic career. And so a single
Mm-hmm.
episode of care does not define your entire life-related need for musculoskeletal services, neuromusculoskeletal services.
Yeah.
So if you are only approaching the swim analogy as a single race, and then once you're out of the water, you never want to get in the pool, that's not a good way to provide care. You're going to have multiple meets. They're going to have multiple degrees of importance,
Yeah.
and so the care you provide needs to relate to that. That somebody's going to have to dip back in the water 2 or 3 times a year. If you look at the population-based studies, the clinical need is going to be there. The musculoskeletal burden is going to be there, especially as our society gets older. And
Mm-hmm.
so you need to prepare the swimming pool to absorb these individuals when they need to dip. Like you are the
Mm-hmm.
pool keeper, you are the
Right.
lifeguard, but you need to ensure safety, stability, and proper conditions so that when the race is over, you can prepare for the next race, so you can compete in it again. So
Wow. That's so brilliant. I mean, you flip the script right there. People celebrate that they've been able to stay away from the pool, i.e., the consumption of healthcare. They think that's a win, right? And
Mhm.
what you're saying is let's flip the script and let's actually be healthcare that provides wellness so that you are in the pool, so that you can still participate in all the things that are meaningful to your life. So we're bringing you into a healthcare space on the regular or on the irregular, but not making you fearful or celebrating the fact that you stayed out of the healthcare space while you're silently eroding in function and eroding in capacity because you never
Yeah.
got checked on. And you say, my only goal is to not need care. Guess what? 10, 15 years down the road, we could have done more about this had we seen you on a more regular basis. I love the script that you are writing there. That's excellent. It's aspirational and it's based in reality too.
Absolutely, right. Think of I don't remember whose quote it is, but how do you go broke? First, like first slowly and then quickly. Like it's right? Like does your health decline? Like
Yeah,
it declines slowly over time until the symptoms become palpable. But
right.
one of my favorite quotes is that don't fight mold, fight the humidity.
Yeah,
I think a system that's built to fight mold is a reactive system that only looks into symptomology as a primary course of clinical care. You need to look
yeah,
in the entire individual and see what are the barriers to recovery on a psychological, on a physiological, on an environmental level. And then as a gatekeeper of at least one system, you reduce these barriers, and you also communicate with other professionals. They can reduce like function on their domain of expertise, and
yeah,
that makes you a healthcare professional because that's your lane. That is my barrier to overcome, and I'm going to communicate with a behavioral health therapist because there's a need. I'm going to communicate with a medical team because there's a need, and we're going to become a part of the larger entity because like it or not, like life is not infinite, right? Life is finite. And so
yeah,
if we can ensure a better transition through life as professionals, we fulfilled our clinical obligation, we fulfilled our professional obligation.
yeah. And I love the fact that you are not saying, not in my backyard, not in my pool, that you are in being inclusive as a multidisciplinary provider. This is what we can contribute. Let's elevate what we can contribute. And let's not try to knock down every other profession on our way toward elevating ourselves. That's not great for society. It's not great for healthcare. And it's not great for the clarity of mind of a consumer that doesn't know who to believe and where to go now.
Well, for sure.
Um,
Yeah. Like
we
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I think the single thought experiment for that mentality that you just outlined is I
Yeah.
ask young therapists to, in a single sentence, to define what is physical therapy. Like,
Hmm.
just give me, like, if I pretend like I'm just landed from Mars and I don't know what this means. Can you define this discipline that you belong to? What is, and it's rare for someone to have a cohesive definition of what they do, which is unfortunate because I think any dentist will be able to define dentistry.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but and given like we have this broad spectrum of care, we have this broad, like relatively inclusive discipline. But like, what is it that you do? Like, you help movement and what, right? Like, it's that like the
Yeah.
follow the Toyota method and why and why and until you get to the root of it. So it's yeah, there's a lot we can do to get it better.
You do a great job of helping us all with thought experiments, bringing our minds to the table, and then also feeding us some thought experiments as well. I've seen many of your posts and articles on the like. I appreciate that. You talked about the fact that you see the next 5 years as being very exciting, a great time to be a therapist. What are you most optimistic about in our lane, in the profession of physical therapy? What do you see that's got you excited and are you most aspirational about?
I see a great opportunity for us as a discipline to align with value-based care, but not in a poorly defined value-based care as a throwaway for like as a failed experiment for the last 10 years, but rather
Mhm.
value as a entity where, in essence, having skin in the game, being able to stand by our outcomes, being able to measure outcomes, and being able to standardize care at least at the lowest level, so that the care with best available evidence to be able to provide these risk-based contracts to individuals because that's what healthcare is transitioning to. So I think
Mhm.
value-based care is a great opportunity. The second part I think that gives us the best opportunity in the next 5 years is alignment with a digital health solution. So rather
Mhm.
than calling digital health as a standalone co-evolving entity, seeing digital health as a initial point of entry as the system starts to embrace that mode of entry over a traditional legacy point of entry. So I'm highly optimistic where we are as a discipline, and I'm highly optimistic that we will be able to pivot and change and justify what we do to the payers so that we can then reorganize around this new philosophy, this new discipline specific domain of expertise. So that's is where I see our industry going in the next 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that you're resonating consistent with your earlier message, using technology to our collective advantage, help ourselves, help our patients as well. That's the collective that we're looking at there. And I appreciate your optimism in that regard as well. And I think there's standardization that can, as the first part of your answer elaborated on, that standardization can come back and forth with the electronic health record and electronic medical record. Both of those, one can feed the other toward greater standardization then as well, and potentially give us back more time directly with our patients by capturing what we're doing without us constantly typing it in then as well. And I know you're um, speaking about that and working on that to some degree. Let me ask the reverse question. What are you most pessimistic about for the profession over the next 5 years?
So I think I believe in cycles, and I believe
Mhm.
in systems. And I think there's been a negative feedback loop in terms of who is entering our profession and who schools are accepting to enter our profession. And
Mhm.
so GPA and your scholastic aptitude is not an exclusive indicator of your success, but it helps when your system absorbs and adapts smart university students.
Right.
When the average GPA to a PT school goes from 3.8 to 3.1, that is telling to who's entering the profession. And so, considering the lifespan of these clinicians that are going to leave, they will require a greater amount of mentorship and guidance as they enter the profession by more tenured, experienced clinicians that should be able to then do more of an apprenticeship type position that will allow them
Mhm.
to still thrive in the industry. So I'm not pessimistic, but I'm cautious about
Yeah.
clinicians entering a workforce unprepared and not being guided to what prepared a qualitative clinician looks like. So
Mm.
that would be my 5-year caution.
Wow, I love that too. I mean, we hear a lot of, if you will, today's students valuing mentorship in their first place of employment. And everybody wants to say, we've got mentorship. But I see where this can be the plant that we have raised as a function of what's been planted as seeds. We need to actually give more support to an emerging student, an emerging clinician, as compared in the past. And I've never heard that elaborated in such a manner that you did, because a lot of people, myself included, ascribe the, if you will, neediness of mentorship. And I love being a mentor, but people call it that as this generation needs more mentorship.
Mhm.
But in fact, you're telling me that it may be a very sensible reason why they would need more mentorship, and that we need to place systems in position to provide that early structure so that when the winds come, when the heat comes, etc., that plant can have some, like we started our first discussion before we began the recording, can have some anti-fragility
Mhm.
because we want to build resilience. And I don't know, does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we have to embrace and endorse this generational gap for
Mhm.
the generation of individuals that are entering a profession that have a very different prior, right? So in a Bayesian sense, that anti-fragility, that their priors will feed into their futures, and so these are tech-equipped, technology. Dominant individuals that may not have the same capacity to deliver empathetic care based on just the way the society has structured in the last 10 or 15 years. So
Yeah.
without this mentorship, right, and it will take your and my generation of clinicians to actually show this human guided, patient centered alignment that is part of care, right? It is part of that active ingredient that makes therapy therapy. But without mentorship, it's very hard to learn through just didactics. It's very hard to take an online course to learn about therapeutic alignment or patient centeredness and actually understand how it works. You'll understand the didactics, but not the actual principle. So,
Yeah, and that shapes where we need to be for education and continuing education is the demonstration of practical application, the ability for someone to have practical application, experiment with it, learn from themselves as well. I appreciate that change in model as well. So, Alex Bendersky, you have had quite a varied clinical and non-clinical career. We've talked a little bit about your past and where you've come from. How about you? When we look at where you've been employed and what opportunities you've created for yourself and where you headed, give us a total picture of what you see yourself doing over the next 10 or 15. What are some of the things that you're looking for in a next employment? And if you want to hearken just a little bit about your past experiences, Spry, Luna, to name drop a few, that's been very significant. Tell us kind of where you see that trajectory of where you're headed personally.
yeah, thank you, Mike. I really strongly believe that every experience, every prior experience, is net positive, even if it's
Mhm,
sometimes suboptimal.
mhm,
So every experience to this point has prepared me for the next experience because I was able to learn from it. But I'm also humbled to know that I have an entire journey, an entire life of learning in front of me. So the next position that will be available to me will be the position I hope to learn most from,
mhm,
because I think any point of employment is a bi-directional relationship that you enter with an agreement that you're going to give your best effort and your best knowledge base in return for the opportunity to continue to learn and continue to grow
mhm,
professionally, but also grow spiritually as an individual because the work
mhm,
is work. So right now I have an opportunity to either align with a technology provider or align with a large health system, with both very interesting opportunities. One, to create an architecture for the system, to create more practical functional workflows, and the other to help develop a piece of technology into a more modern iteration.
mhm.
I think both like I guess I'm lucky enough to have this as a positive opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm incredibly optimistic that as a discipline, as long as we allow technology in our space. And again, I know it's redundant, but and I like my position will always be a bridge between technologists, engineers, and clinicians, professionals, which is necessary because I see
Yeah.
technologists, engineers solve problems, they create, but they don't understand the actual ambiguity and the contextual nuisance of clinical care provision. Clinicians want features that don't have direct impact on their clinical workflow. They want features
Mhm.
that are marketed to them. So they want
Yes.
a triple cheeseburger with extra large fries because they saw a commercial without understanding that a grilled chicken sandwich will probably suit their needs better long term. So I think being that bridge where I can translate clinical knowledge to in a tech language, I can translate technology constraints to the clinician to understand that you like the cost does not justify the development, and
Yeah.
so that's me in a nutshell. So,
Well, I look forward to hearing where you land then. And, won't it be, an exceptional hire for whomever you join next that the person that they hire will actually continue to contribute, evolve, grow, and be a better version of themselves in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, etc. So we can all only hope to aspire toward that growth mindset that really fulfills the potential that we've got. And you're living that out. I appreciate that. Alex, anything that you'd like to wrap us up with in terms of a project you're working on, a book that you're reading, an article that you just read, or someone that you're following? What's something else that's on your short term radar that you want our listeners to be aware of?
So first and foremost, I want to throw it back to you, Mike, and thank you for everything you are doing for our profession. I have been monitoring you, and you have been on my radar for a long time too. And I think you really are a thought leader and a voice leader, and you are putting yourself out there by writing books and by developing a system that I think more people need to follow you and need to read your writings, need to follow your lessons. So thank you for that. Um, as a book, so I have a natural fallacy where I try to get through 2 books a week. And so I get really excited based on availability heuristic about the book that I'm reading today, and I forget about the book I read last week. Uh, but one of the best books I read is from Lawrence Ball in the last couple of weeks, and it's called The New Science, which is a better understanding, better interpretation of the genetic science from the last 10 years, and to see how the directionality and the causality is being changed to how we appreciate clinical innovation. Some of the projects, so I'm speaking at PPS this year on building a guardrails around technology and integration. So building a safety net around artificial intelligence in clinical space. And I think it's really important to create a system that is both functional but safe. So that is my PPS project. I'm
Nice.
speaking at CSM on a clinical workflow and optimization of clinical workflows through technology. And Katie Sutton and I are developing a curriculum on team-based model in clinical space. So you have a more practical, viable integration of physical therapists and physical therapy assistants in the clinical space
Nice.
to optimize delivery of care so that you can actually have a complementary model of professional entities that work together as a true team. So that those are the projects I have, and all of the other smaller projects that I have on my plate. So
Yeah. Hey, thank you for lending time out of your busy week with, preparing those projects, presentations, still trying to consume 2 books, seeing patients one day per week, soon to be joining another company as well. So we've benefited from our time with you, Alex. And I want to thank you for joining Tuesdays with Mike. We will get the book that you recommended into the show notes of the YouTube link then as well. So great to have time just to be here, present in a flowing conversation with you. So I can't thank you enough.
Mike, thank you. It is a pleasure, and thank you for your time, and thank you for everything you do.